Hey guys, it's old Pops here to talk a little bit about a subject that I hold very close to my heart. We're going to talk a little bit about anger and some of the ways you can really foul up your life by mismanaging your anger.
Many of us grow up learning that anger is a bad thing. We are taught that we must control our anger, hide our anger, or simply try to not get angry so often. But let me ask you this. Is anger really all that bad of a thing? Anger, in actuality, is a beautiful emotion. Anger enables us to defend ourselves, defend our loved ones, defend our rights as human beings, and often motivates us to make positive changes in our lives and in the world around us. In many ways, anger is like fire. Fire is perhaps one of God's greatest gifts to mankind, and fire is a crucial building block of our civilization.
We're going to take a look at 5 common ways that people tend to mismanage their anger. The first way to mismanage your anger is to ignore your anger altogether.
One of the more common ways in which people mismanage anger is to ignore anger or to turn it inward. This is sometimes called stuffing your anger.
As a kid, I was angry, but I used to stuff the anger all the time. I would never let anybody, I'd be laughing on the outside, but really angry or crying on the inside, you know. And by the time I was 14 years old, I thought, wow. When I was a child growing up, we got beat with a leather strap or a board, whatever my stepdad had. Didn't matter. And if somebody did something, you all got it that way. You sure you got the right one. And it was crazy. They would beat you until you was bawling. And they didn't just spank you once or twice. They beat you till they were tired. And then they would beat you to give you to shut up. I'll give you something really bawling. I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or do whatever. It was just crazy, you know.
When we do try to express our anger, we are chastised and corrected. Eventually we learn that it's not okay to be angry, so we ignore our anger, stuff our anger, we turn it inwards. Maybe we even get to the point where we deny that we even have any anger. The problem with this is that we humans don't seem to do well with holding anger inside over long periods of time. Now, we do seem to have the ability to delay expressing our anger for short periods of time, which is a pretty cool thing and probably keeps us from getting in all sorts of trouble with our employers, our spouses, and with really big and ugly people. But when we hold on to our anger over the long term, it can cause all sorts of problems.
The second way that a lot of people mismanage their anger is to express it in an inappropriate way.
While expressing our emotions is a good thing, some of us swing all the way to the other end of the spectrum and express our anger in ways that are harmful or hurtful.
It's a learned process for me, and it's something I've been fighting to change my whole life. A lot of real loud volume. The lion's roar, I guess, is what I call it now. Well, usually I yell. I yell, and the worst parts of my life, when it really was tragic, and I felt threatened that my way of life was threatened, I would verbally abuse and physically abuse the people that I loved. And right after you get done with those explosions of anger, there's a period of remorse, and it usually ends up in jail time once you get physical. And those are times in my life that I'd really like to forget.
Another way people mismanage their anger is to experience avoidable anger.
Believe it or not, we can avoid a lot of needless anger by simply changing the way that we think. Many times when we get angry, it's because we have irrational beliefs or extreme beliefs. Let me give you an example. If I hold a belief that I must be treated with respect at all times by everyone, or else I'm not a real man, what happens when somebody slightly disrespects me? Well, now my status as a real man is at stake. I feel extremely threatened and I become extremely angry. Why do I have such an extreme emotion? Well, it all goes back to my extreme belief that I must be shown respect or else I'm not a real man.
When somebody says something to me, I do not have normal thinking with my anger. Somebody could be saying, hi, how are you? And it comes back to me as, hey, screw you, I'm going to slap you. It doesn't, and sometimes people are saying things, and I've learned now, they're just saying stuff. It don't mean it's how I perceive it, you know? If somebody calls me an SOB, does that make me one?
Another way to avoid needless anger is to learn what your anger triggers are. Anger triggers are people, places, things, events, emotions, and situations which tend to trigger our anger response.
How about this? Maybe you mismanage your anger by escalating it.
Anger comes from the more primitive portion of your brain known as the limbic system. When we get angry, the limbic system temporarily overwhelms the cortex of the brain where higher thought and logical thinking take place.
The final way people mismanage anger is by becoming anger addicts.
Anger is a really funny emotion. Although anger feels bad and uncomfortable, anger also feels really good. Anger releases a flood of adrenaline in our bodies, and it also releases dopamine. The rush we feel from anger is real similar to the rush a person feels from doing methamphetamine or cocaine. Anger also makes us feel really powerful and in control. This pleasure that we experience from anger can become so addicting that we begin to look for things to be angry about so that we can experience that rush over and over again. Like any other addiction, an anger addiction can be tough to kick.
When I got angry, I felt like I was just really powerful and could do anything. It was kind of an exhilarating feeling. The problem is that after a while, I started looking for reasons to be angry. I didn't realize I was even doing that until my counselor pointed it out to me. It was kind of an addiction for me.
It's pretty obvious that there are a lot of ways to mismanage your anger and cause yourself a boatload of problems in the process. But we're not going to leave you hanging. Here are some tips to help you manage your anger in healthy ways. Anger management tip 1. Avoid needless anger.
Whenever possible, avoid people or situations which tend to make you angry.
You know, a lot of things trigger anger for me. One of the things I find that trigger me the most is when I feel I'm being disrespected, or there was a long period in my life that I suffered from low self-esteem, probably from my upbringing.
I know that anger can be a kind of a scary thing, and it can be tricky to manage sometimes. Some of us have a harder time, a tougher time than others, but it can be done. Believe me.